In this video, we're going to take a look at one of these emergency exit signs that have failed. It normally takes one of these fluorescent tubes on the inside, and this particular one has failed, and even if you replace the tube on the inside, it still doesn't work. We can't get this model anymore, and we don't want to really modify the ceiling to fit a aftermarket one in that's LED. But what we could do is try and convert it to LED. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Turn it into an LED emergency light fitting or emergency exit sign. It comes out of the ceiling relatively easy. There's just two screws. Then the light panel comes out, the light guide, and then inside there's a cartridge that just pulls out. That it's got all the cupboards in there, and that's what we'll be modifying. Here's one that's already been modified to LED. So it is possible. So let's go to the workshop and see how hard it can be to convert it to LED. So this here is the cartridge that comes out, and as you can see, here's the fluorescent tube, and it has the sign, which is a light guide, and it projects the light into the sign like so. And this particular model is quite old. The fluorescent tube has been changed and still doesn't work, so I assume the driver is gone. So what we want is we want this electronic ballast / driver to be removed, and we want a LED driver in there, and if we can get rid of this fluorescent tube and then see if it's possible to mount this on the inside so that it projects the LED panel projects the light into this light guide here. And one thing that could be problematic is this little socket here needs to plug into the receptacle up in the ceiling, so we need to save this little socket, and our new LED driver board needs to connect to the socket, so we'll have to unsolder or cut it out of the board. So first thing we need to do is strip this down. But let's take a look at what we can put in here. So it turns out there's these bulkhead emergency light fittings, and they're relatively cheap to buy, whereas these were quite expensive when they were new. And the replacement for this particular one that fits straight in is extremely expensive, where these are very cheap. So it is worth modifying them to LED. So if we open this up, we see that the inside pieces fit perfectly, or near enough perfectly. So we can unscrew them. Unscrew the LED panel. This unclips. Unscrew the battery, which will fit nicely in there as well. We have one battery. Unplug the LED. One LED panel, it'll go in there. And the LED driver. Now, it's a shame to throw this away, but we don't need this. So now we have a little driver board that will fit in there nicely, and this is emergency as well. We have a battery that is pretty much the right size to fit on this side in there. So all we need to somehow is marry this piece up so that when we push it up in the ceiling it connects. So we need to maybe put this on a bit of flex to turn it into a freestanding plug. And this could be somehow mounted inside. So let's start by gutting all of this bits out from here and see if we can fit that all in there. So I'll take the battery out first. I think it's just the 2 screws to hold this board in. Right, so now we have some space to put this board in, and the battery could sit nicely in there. So the only problem I see is these two standoff. They need to be snapped out. So we'll just be very brutal with it and maybe just use the side cutters. We'll break them out. There we go. Now we have some space for this little board to sit in there nicely. Almost like it was made for it. That's our LED driver. Right, so the next thing you've got to do is get rid of these end caps for the fluorescent tube. They don't need to be there anymore. This test button can temporarily come off. Get rid of that little bit of flex there. I think we need to nip a bit of these at the bottom so the LED panel can fit. There we go. Put that aside for now. Now I think that panel can nearly fit in there, like so. But in order for it to sit flush down, I think we need to nibble away these bits of plastic here. Plastic's gone brittle because the ultraviolet light tends to make plastic brittle very quickly. I think that should give us enough clearance. So this panel should fit in here nicely now. Push that cable down the hole. There we go. So I think all we need now is maybe 2 screws to hold that down. So we'll drill little holes in there so that we can just screw straight into the plastic. So we'll carefully screw these into the plastic. Take care not to strip the plastic. Should really do this by hand. There we go. So that panel is now secured in there. So now the next step would be to see where this board is going to go. Let's say it goes more or less over there. So what we need to do is we need to take this little socket out that connects to the other bit that sits up in the seating. So we'll be quite brutal and just won't bother unsoldering it. We'll just be brutal and break it out, because this is rubbish anyway, so it needs to be thrown away. So my poor side cutters has to do horrific work now. but it gets the job done. I'm sure you can buy these plugs, but I don't have any at the moment, so I'm kind of forced to reuse this one, which is fine. It's not an ideal solution, but it does the job. So if we clean that up a bit, run a file across it, we effectively have our socket. So we just need to solder. We need to solder our live and neutral onto there, and then put this on a separate little fly lead. So what I've done is I've attached a live and neutral to these, soldered them onto the back of the PCB, and put some insulation in the form of hot melt glue, but you can use silicone and let it go off overnight. But the hot melt glue will provide adequate insulation. It just needs to be plugged in, and it's inside the unit, so as long as nothing touches, it just makes it nice and secure. It plugs in and stays in place, and then that would then feed power onto here. So what we'll do is we'll wire this in. So what this little wire link here is for is you've got neutral, live, and switch live. So depending how you want to use this emergency light, if you wanted to switch on and off with a switch, then you don't need this link. But in this case, it's on all the time. So what you do is you link the live and the switch live. You link them together with this little link. So what we'll do is we'll put the neutral in first. And then the live. Right, so we've got our switch live and live linked together with a little bridge link, and our little fly lead to plug up to the other bit in the ceiling. So next I think I will add the battery. So our battery will have to go here where the old battery went. Now you have these little things for cable ties to go through. It's actually quite difficult to get a cable tie through there. So we'll use some of this wire, solid core copper wire. Right. So that's our cable ties, and we put our battery in there, and we just twist these together. That way the battery doesn't flop about. Like I said, you could use cable ties, but this does the job. There we go, battery in. So the next step is a little driver board. So I think what we can do, this little board, we can either try and screw it down into the plastic, but I think since it sits like this way up in the ceiling, it's not going to go anywhere. All we need to do is stop it flopping about. I think if we just get some double-sided tape, these little strips of double-sided tape, the foam type, and if we just stick the board down, I think that's perfectly adequate. I have screwed them down in the past, but let's be a bit lazy and just use some double-sided tape. Same way the cheap Chinese fittings work. But if you want to, you can just screw it down, just drill into the plastic and self-taper it straight into the plastic. I've done both. This is just quicker. There we go. Right, so now we can plug the LED panel in. And last but not least, the battery can go in. The only thing I found myself doing is the battery was too short, so I extended it with some wire and sleeved it. So the original battery was a bit too short. Alright, so that is essentially our fitting done. This needs to go back on because it'll look odd if it didn't have it. Right, so the only thing left to do is to test it to see if it works. One old-fashioned fluorescent style emergency exit sign being converted to LED by utilizing a cheap emergency light fitting. Use bulkhead style ones. So let's give that a test and put it back together and see what it looks like in the ceiling. I've improvised a connection. Not the safest, but it'll help us to just test this out on the bench quickly. So let's zoom out a bit. Let's apply some power. Stand clear, contact. Oh, here we go. It's working. Now the true test would be if we disconnect the power, it should go into emergency mode where it's slightly dimmer and running on batteries. There we go. So now we can simply disconnect the power, which I've already turned off. And the unit is fully running on batteries. And it should project its light nicely through the light guide. I would call that a success. Now this should never need replacing another fluorescent tube again. These LEDs last literally forever. I've never had one of these fail before. So for a cheap LED light fitting conversion, I'd say this is a really good result. There we go. It's back up in the ceiling, looking good. And now it should be maintenance free. No more changing fluorescent tubes. And for those of you that might have noticed that I just had the blue and the brown live and neutral, the unit is actually earthed. It's just that there's no metal bits on that cartridge, but all the bits that go up in the ceiling that is made out of metal, that is the earth goes straight to that. So you have live, neutral and earth going to the little connection up in the ceiling, and it's just the little bridge that goes down to the plastic cartridge. There's no earth on that, but everything else is earthed. All the metal bits is earthed. But I will call that a successful LED conversion for an emergency exit sign, aka the running man. Thanks for watching. If you like these kind of videos, please subscribe to my channel, and we can make more of them. You can give me some suggestions for things I can make, build or fix or modify. We can have a lot of fun together. Tell all your mates, let's make it a nice big community. See you later.